Okay, so welcome to the April 2024 Federal Fiscal Grants Communities of Practice. Thanks for joining us. Today we have a couple of exciting things on the agenda to share with you. We always start with some celebrations and shout outs, and I hope that you guys will take a minute to think about the things that you can celebrate either personally or put it in the chat or come off mute. I host this as a meeting instead of a webinar so that you guys can unmute at any time. It's just so nice to be able to do that and not have to just raise your hand. So thank you for chiming in and just again celebrating those things that you're proud of or that is a relief to you when we get to that point. We always go on to the data acquisition calendar as a reminder, just some of the federal items that are coming up so that they're on our radar and we don't forget to do them. Even if you're not the person, if you see that, you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy Susie some chocolate because she's got to do that IC report this month. So just consider those things when you're looking at that with us today. We're going to do a quick recap of March. March was really heavy and great content, so we'll do a little bit of a review of that. We could talk about some great training events coming up that we have available for some of these federal grant applications that you guys are going to be doing shortly. Yes, in the spring, it's almost May. So we'll get ready for those. They've got links to get registered for those. We're going to talk about some hot topics too around the country, locally, federally, those types of things, and some highlights of the legislation. We're going to talk about maintenance of effort and supplement, not supplant, just reminders. We're not getting into the nitty gritty today, just reminders as you guys are doing your fourth quarter closeouts and trying to balance and buffer and say, I got to spend this and spend that to make sure that those things are also on your radar. And then we're going to talk about some updates to the Uniform Grant Guidance. We have an effective date. Hooray! It's October 1st this fall. So we'll talk about what that's going to look like and entail for you guys. And then it's just a reminder that we had started a resource for year-end checkout, just kind of like a checklist for you guys to start embedding and building, or at least thinking about, hey, we should put something together like this. And I just really think it's nice once you build your own as a district or a charter, just so that it's on everybody's radar. Oh yeah, last year we almost forgot about, fixed assets or something. We got to make sure we do that before the auditors get here. Or, that one person who always forgets to turn in their mileage and they try to turn it in September and we've already closed out the year. So those things that you'll keep notes on. So yeah, let's get started. Happy fourth quarter. I know we're almost a whole month in, but happy fourth quarter. It is budget season. And everybody's asking me how much money we're getting because I know it's budget season. You guys are trying so hard to figure out what to do and how to do that for the budgeting. But something super exciting that I'm sure all of you know by now is that gap state funding had passed. So hooray, hooray, hooray. That is a huge, huge, huge relief to you guys so that you guys are going to be estimating to, what's my cash flow and my fund balance going to look like so that I can be ready to know what we can fund for next year. Because again, you're going to be looking at trying to get a budget appropriated. So hooray. All right, let's go to, before I do that, check in the chat. We can pause before we get into what's on our radar. If you have a personal anything, anybody wants to come off mute to celebrate before we move on. Okay, we'll keep putting them in the chat. We're all going to celebrate each other. I'm just super excited we made it to the fourth quarter and that legislative session's over. That's my biggest celebration. Okay, so April, we're already deep into April, and Maddie's gonna put the data acquisition calendar link in case you want to pull it up yourself to make it bigger. But this is April. April didn't look so bad. There's still some super important things like on the 30th, as we just talked about budgeting, you've got to notify your county clerk of your hearing. There's so many different things that were super important that you still had to get done. We just passed a couple of big dates. And then there's still, 3 for the end of the month here. So make sure that you know who's doing that child nutrition application and reporting. Make sure that you guys know who turned that in to Carol for the notification of the county clerks. So make sure you know, especially if you're the administrator. Now let's talk about May. When I look at this, I say, wow, special education is hogging May. There's so much due in May, but more so not due, but some of it are notifications. So don't freak out. There's some other things that you guys are going to be doing with McKinney-Vento, application-wise. But these LEA determination things that are listed under special ed, those are where we will notify you guys if you guys had over-identified students in a certain population and so on and so forth. So no news is good news on those pieces. So again, those are notifications of noncompliance. Most of you guys would already know if you had anything applicable, even nearing any of those scenarios. So when you look at this, I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. There is still a lot to do that's not non-compliance notification though. So when you guys are looking through this list, you can filter. My pictures here, you can see that I filtered on the due dates and the department. I tried to keep it mostly finance related kind of stuff so that you guys knew when you're on the finance call with the IASBO group with Julie Oberly, they're going to really drill down into some of the other pieces that are public school finance. For us, this is more of just fiscal on our radar, and or program directors that may be the people that are helping to provide data for these post school outcome surveys and things like that, or to be the conduit if there's a survey going out to make sure that you're the person that communicates that to parents, and so on and so forth. So we talk about this, we pause and we say, we want to make sure that we know that, that these things are available for us to drill down on and then have that contact number for the person in charge so that we don't feel lost on how to, finalize any of those reports. Okay, next up, we're going to talk about upcoming events because there's some important ones coming up. So the first item up on the list is ESEA and ESSER funds. And I think I'm going to turn this over either to Josh or to Kathy to talk about this one.
I'm happy to do it. Hi, guys. Yeah, there are several things. I think at the beginning of the year, we called this like the giant funding cliff that is coming. And so just, clear reminders. There are several years of grants under ESEA that are all coming to a close that have been extended, that they all end on September 30th of this year, which is not very far away. I don't know the months, 4 months, 3 months, something like that. Not very long. And that means that you do have to have all of those funds obligated very shortly. So there's a lot of those ESEA grants. All of them were given tidings waivers. You should have seen your superintendent, business managers, federal program directors. You should have gotten an email that says actually what your balance is for all of those grants. So if you didn't get that and you need it, let us know. But we're going to start emailing that monthly to just say, hey, are you aware you still have X amount of dollars in each one of these grants? You need to be drawing these down. They're going to expire. And so just be aware of that. And then as it says there's no further tidings waivers right now. So there's no extension to those dollars in particular. You need to have a plan to expend them, or else we're going to have to revert them back to USED, do back and set on. The other big one, though, is also we're at the end of COVID funding. So ESSER 3 is the last one. And similarly, there's going to be very little extension to this. You have to obligate all of those funds also by that September 30th deadline. And then I have a little bit of time for liquidation, but there's really not going to be much allowable extension to that liquidation deadline. So you still have to obligate it by the 30th. But and hopefully you're receiving all of those things by the end of the calendar year so we can get them reimbursed. Otherwise, same thing, those monies go away. So big warning, red flag. Make sure you are looking and paying attention to where you're at with those balances, and that you guys as a district, your schools, whoever's using those funds, that you're aware of how you're going to do that and you're getting it done.
Absolutely.
I think that's about it for that. So there's my doom bell.
Never waste a penny. That was always the goal in my district. And here's the next one, kind of reiterating what Josh said for those GRA drawdown request dates. And then no tidings waivers in the future. So all this will just be there for you guys to help you out. And I know Josh's team is going to continue to remind you. Never waste a penny. We don't want any misunderstandings. We want you guys to spend those dollars as they're intended and really utilize those funds. This next one, Maddie's also going to drop this registration into the chat. Did anybody else on federal team want to talk about this one?
I'll just keep the ball rolling. Yeah, so the application for next year is opening soon. There's the save the dates. I really want to say though, this is a return to the old workshop style. So if you plan to come, what you're going to get is you're going to get a little bit of content, but you're going to get a lot of work time with our ESEA staff on site to walk you through the application and help you to get it as complete as you can, at least on that date. We know you got to do some more budget work after that usually, but you should be able to come, show up. We'll walk you through the essential parts of the application and give you a lot of good solid work time and a lot of face-to-face time with our ESEA staff. So there's the save the dates, the registration. Make sure you do that. We're excited to see you.
Yeah.
Hey, Josh.
Go ahead.
Looking at the Pocatello site, I don't know if you were here at the last thing they had. I signed up for was it the legislative tour or something? I couldn't even get in because ISU's parking lot, half of it is under construction. It's bad parking on a regular day. When they eliminate 50%, it's horrible. I drove around the whole campus twice. I went to the traffic office and they said, well, you can park in the street. I said, no, I can't, it's full. They said, you can park 2 blocks that way. Then you can walk back and we'll give you a sticker. Then you can walk back and put it in your car. Then you can walk to the pond building. That for $6. And at that point, I thought, you know what? I appreciate your efforts to help me. I'm just going to drive away and catch this later. So I've been to these workshops. I actually think they're very valuable, but only if you can get in. And I don't blame you guys. I do not understand why ISU doesn't have a big fat asterisk saying we are limiting this, because I don't like when the traffic people have no idea that we have a meeting and that it's 50, 60, 70 people. So I just put it out there for you guys to double check on parking, because it was, I know I assume I'm not the only one who gave up and didn't show up.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Joel. Yeah, we'll do some work then to make sure we're communicating or helping as much as possible, knowing that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Josh, Joel, at the registration site, ISU did at least reach out to us, and at that point it was kind of, oh, what do we do? What do we do? So they are saying that the GO1 lot is closed for renovations. They're going to have the GO3 lot available. The great news for you is you will not have to pay and you will not receive a ticket. And so we have worked that out. And if something would happen that you would get a ticket, why, let us know. But that's the assurance that they've given us. But appreciate the heads up on that.
Okay, well, thank you. And again, I'm not criticizing you guys. I think it's a great venue if you can get into it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks you guys for the feedback and the updates. And again, any of these that there's opportunities for carpooling, consider those things as well. And I can't say enough that I hear such great things whenever there's a conference like these workshops where you guys can come and work with staff and ask those specific to your district or LEA questions that you need to and have access to do that. It's just so much more personal to help you guys be able to work through any issues you might have. have or questions. So definitely make sure you register, and we did put that link in the chat. The next registration that we have here as a link, and Maddie's going to put that into the chat as well. This is going to be just kind of an overview of the IDEA application that we're going to be doing on Thursday, May 9th. And it's just it will be recorded. And hopefully posted shortly after, just to help you guys remember. I'm going to go high level and not go into the nitty gritty. But the most exciting thing, I have been working all stinking year long on this, some enhancements. I put in automations and enhancements. I've been doing Boolean algebra with our programmers, and those guys are geniuses. It's going to fill in half of the excess cost sheet, which is everybody's least favorite part of the application. So it's going to import as much as possible for you when you've already filled it out in another section. So I'm so excited to show you guys that and save you time at the end, so you don't get all those red errors that make you guys crazy. We're all about saving you guys time. Just note on here, we have in bold that when you join this webinar, you have to have this passcode, and we will send out, once we have all the registration, a reminder for those who did actually register, because it's a true webinar. We'll send out the reminder of that code. And then too, once we have the posting of the recordings, that you guys can refer to that if you have questions. Super exciting. All right, I have a couple application dates to remind everybody of, because I'm already getting questions. So we open up, and I think federal programs is similar, in mid-May-ish. Again, assuming we have allocations and can make this all work. But that's about when we open up, because for the IDEA application anyway, ours is due June 15th, because that gives me a couple weeks to kick it back if something wasn't right. We have to certify all of these by June 30th. And the reason, and CFSGA, same way, the reason we have to do this is that for you guys to be able to start spending effective July 1st, you have to have passed all of these assurances and things that say, yes, I want the money. I'm acknowledging that I want it. I'm giving you a preliminary budget that says, here's a estimated way of how I would spend it that's legal, and and helps us know what your intentions are. So that's that first round for us. And I know they're going to go over all this too on the CFSGA side. People panic and think that this, for us, that this is the really detailed one. I kind of call it a garbage budget. It's your best guess, and you just don't know, right? I'm not sure. You're going to have to redo it all in July anyway, because I might update the allocations in case something changed, and you won't know what your carryovers are because you haven't finished your year. So it's a shot in the dark, but this is something important to qualify for funding to start spending July 1st. And again, for IDEA, you have to prove out your maintenance of effort budget, which is an eligibility test to say, yep, I'm going to meet it, and those types of things. But you really truly have until November 15th for us to finalize things and know that everything is solid and finalized from the actual spending. So hopefully that's helpful, and it will not cause panic because you'll have some time. And then I have just some links in here to help you guys know with the access to these applications, both CFSGA and IDEA application. Make sure that you have access. Test a login. You can test a login today. Make sure you know you have access. A lot of it is tied to an IC role. So just make sure that you do that you got to be a registered user, have the right role to be able to get into these applications. So don't wait till the last minute. Now let's do a quick recap of last month. Again, get those login credentials ready. Be ready to know who's gathering FTE, and are we even close? Will I have carryovers? What's my budget looking like? Are there any restrictions? Those types of things, just getting those on the back burner to be prepped and ready, knowing that you'll get a chance to update it anyway, but just it's going to be as close to a best guess as you can have. We also had last month China Hirosaki, our state director, talk about Medicaid and her perspective when she was a director in Caldwell on Medicaid billing and estimations and service rates from different provider types of services and providers. Because if you think about this, the state director has access to all the IEP data and talking to their teams about the services and are the students the same students? Do we have a new one that came on that's going to require more services? is the service provider an employee or a contractor? Because all of these different components feed the expenditures, right? Which again, may also be useful to you as a business manager for an estimate of what type of funding that may come in. And she shared this sheet, and I know she's still working on making it accessible. These Excel tables are difficult, but we will send this out before the year end, I promise. And what she did in here is she would plug in the hourly rates, the hourly hours, or hourly hours, the yearly hours, all those different pieces that basically calculate what she could anticipate for total costs, and then also subsequently how much she could expect in the Medicaid reimbursement, because they're on a fee schedule. So you're going to pay what you're going to pay, but you can estimate what you'll get on those Medicaid fee schedules. So this is super, super, super helpful. And it was, eye-opening to a lot of you. I got a lot of good feedback like, hey, I never thought to do that. And we are trying to bridge those relationships together and really have you guys communicate. She also talked about tracking hours if someone was out sick, like have somebody be the accountability manager to say, hey, we don't know why you didn't turn in any of these billings yet, or the hours or the paperwork. Oh, it's because the kid was gone or out sick or whatever it was. So just to make sure that you have some system in place. So if you haven't watched that one and you weren't there for that, make sure you go back and look at that. It is posted, the recording and the slides. Now, we also were so lucky to have Austin from Bonneville do a lovely presentation on this is pure accounting side, Medicaid closeout methodology. And this is me cherry picking. He had an amazing presentation, also worth watching or rewatching, where the very first thing he talked about really was that the SPED department was included in budgeting discussions. That's so huge, right? They're the ones that know what's going on. So make sure you guys do that. And then truly how he was able to move funding around, or to pre-plan the types of positions that were in the different special education accounts, and how he could try and predict Medicaid reimbursements to absorb all of the extra planned increases to maintenance of effort. I was so happy to see him talking about this, because we always talk about how we have a certain funding order and how you guys can try to absorb that growth in those excess costs so that you don't have to maintain them year to year. So huge, huge, huge. That was the whole premise of his plan. Now, he talked about this idea of a drawdown buffer. And so I've talked about in the past, slow down on your reimbursements for the federal funding in Q4, just until you balance things out. Well, he had another strategy instead of sweeping things in at the end, to really kind of do it throughout the year. And really what this buffer is that he deliberately did not reimburse a certain portion of his expenditures each month. And you can do that. You can still take claims so that you have a pretty good cash flow, but you can be a little conservative and not do the whole thing and then do a big sweeping, grab all the rest of it at the end once you've balanced everything out. The important thing with all of this is that you recognize that the three funding streams for special education is not considered supplanting as you're moving them around, because it's still all special education. And as long as you meet maintenance of effort, which is what did I spend in my own state and local dollars before federal, as long as you still meet that, you can move stuff around. So it was a genius way to do that. I got some good feedback and people were like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. That might be a nice thing to do. It'll still give me cash flow, still show that I have good systems in place, that I have good fiscal accountability. I will just build this buffer. So it was just really nice to have that. And he talked about the shuffle at the end and really that it was key that Medicaid's not ever going to come in the way you thought it would, because I mean, things just happen. You couldn't bill for this. So-and-so was out sick. You anticipated this month, mid-year kids moved to different districts. And so it's not going to be perfect. However, it's going to provide you an opportunity to have a better way of balancing at the end and possibly less journal entries. And he did talk about at the very end a couple of final journal entries, but maybe less. And I know that those are the bane of everyone's existence when you're the accountant. So just keeping that in mind. Again, with that shift, he just talked about how maintenance of effort might not, you can't drop below that threshold. So if for some reason you used up all of the money from Medicaid and so on and so forth, and all the IDEA money, then you might have to increase the MOE, but you also might qualify for an exception. So if you have something that qualifies for an exception, you should take it, even if you've exceeded it. So that's something we'll talk about when we do the application training, but just something to consider. I strongly suggest you go back and listen to Austin talk through his methodology, because it was super, super helpful. Now, he talked about how when they do take an exception, they can transfer more costs out of maintenance of effort, either over to Medicaid if they still had funding, and or to IDEA. So make sure, again, think about those things. You guys were in Q4. You're already trying to see what your thresholds were. Look at the exceptions and think about, did I have staffing changes? Would I qualify for that? Because if you can lower it, you lower it going forward. It's so worth it. So again, go back and watch those. The biggest key thing that Austin talked about is that relationship. You got to just make sure you're feeding each other information throughout the year. Little Timmy moved out. We're not going to be billing for Medicaid. We overestimated. You're going to need to drop that down. You guys on the program side, if you can feed that information to the accountant, it's going to make their job easier and provide you a better budget report throughout the year, because otherwise you might be anticipating that you have excess funding that you actually won't have. And it really does help keep those anxiety levels down. So here's his information. He is our superhero from Bonneville. Now let's talk about some exciting things around the nation. I had a link, just, for you guys to read. It was about some education finance survey data. And I know you guys are feeling this too, because I hear it. It's the end of the COVID relief funding and everybody's getting stressed. And that funding is really failing to keep pace with the needs. And really in the survey, they talk a lot about how there's so many more needs coming from behavioral or, just so many different things coming out of the pandemic. But they were there, a lot of them before the pandemic. But either way, it's a good read if you want to read it. But really, I hear from you guys and from other administrators here at the state that the resources are just short. We know that. We were, fingers crossed that gap funding went through to help us out, but we are getting less federal. So that's, RIFs happen, those reduction in force, things happen. We were doing great things with that pandemic money. You might have some temporary positions that are going away. But the biggest takeaway from this survey was that a lot of education staff, and I'm not saying fiscal specifically, but a lot of education staff thought that they were getting a lot more money in federal than they actually were. So finance folks, consider this. These finance knowledge gaps really make it more difficult for you guys to advocate for additional resources. So make sure that you guys are communicating clearly. That's what I'm saying here. Why is this so important? You guys in the budget office are the voice, the advocate. You're going to talk to those program directors, get all of the information and help relay that. You guys have to be able to convey this to the board, the superintendent, all the other directors, all the constituents. You guys are the main voice of what's going on. So you ought to be able to say, well, yep, you're right. We did used to have that, but that's when we had ESSER funding and that is gone. That was a pandemic level funding. Yes, you're right. We did have a little bit more IDEA money for a year or so, but that was American Rescue Plan and that ended last year. We certainly don't even have it this year because, you get questions like, well, where'd all the money go? So never want to be caught off guard that someone's thinking that, there's waste or abuse. So really, really, really make sure you guys can speak to all these points, even about gap funding and how that may allow for some things to happen, but it's not like it was really a lot of extra money, right? It's still helping to maintain from something you were already planning on. Now, on the local education news, I'm just wondering, we heard from somebody earlier about the post-legislative roadshows, these tours. I hope you guys were able to go. I'm not stealing their thunder because there's still a couple left. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I know that the facilities funding was hopefully well received. It's a start, right? But also think about the communication side. It is not going to be enough. We know that, but to be able to speak to those points that, yep, we are so grateful that we're going to get some facility funding. We're going to use it for some maintenance, but you know what? It's not going to build us a school. So you'll start putting together those talking points to be able to, again, speak to the budgetary needs of your district. or your charter. But gap funding, whew, everybody is super excited. Again, I'm not going to steal the thunder. Just a reminder, we talked about this last month. Here's a link to the legislative session. You can go look up by subject. You can go to E for education and it'll list all the bills out. And then you can click on them. There's other legislative watch and highlights, lots of news reporting that we heard from Idaho Ed News and the local stations. So there's been a lot of recapping. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But we are going to talk about maintenance of effort and supplement, not supplant, and how they kind of go together. So you guys keep this on your radar. We're getting to the end of the year, trying to plan stuff out. People sometimes, we have a lot of new people. So let's talk about this level of effort. Whenever we hear maintenance of effort, we're talking about the level of effort. And I put this funny superhero picture on here because she's like, that's all it means? Seriously? Yes. We want the lights to go on. All this means for maintenance of effort is that you are maintaining your own effort of spending state and local dollars prior to these specific federally sourced funds. And why? Why? Why do we have to do this first? Well, it's because these specific federal targeted funds are meant to supplement things. That's like an additional thing. Hey, states, that's great. You're doing the work. Here's a little extra money to make it even better. So it's not meant to offset your status quo. It's meant to make it better. So think of it that way. And the light is going to go on for you. Now, special education, we do a very transparent couple of worksheets in our application where you have to prove it out to me. We allow you to add transportation and other things into that, your Medicaid match, things that are still coming out of state funding that might not be in those specific IFARMS codes for MOE, maintenance of effort. But I have the code, the reference here if you want to read through more of the details. But basically, you have to meet a compliance expenditure and a budget eligibility to be able to take the funds. So the first piece you do in the spring and May is say, yep, I want the money, I'm going to spend it, here's my budget. And then you come in later and you say, yep, here's my expenditures, I met it. But we're 100%. You have to spend 100% each year of what you had as the highest level. And we do a secondary audit after you guys do all these applications. Once you guys have done your full audited financials, turned it into school finance, done your IFARMS reporting, then I get the lovely report. And same type of report goes to the federal programs group. And they take a look at that as well. Now, again, IDEA has all kinds of crazy things. They have what's called the subsequent year. And what this is referring to is that threshold table I put in with the highlighted pieces that shows all the amounts of level of effort you guys have played or paid over the years. And it tells us what your targeted number is going to be so that you know how to close out your year end. So I would encourage you, and we'll talk about that when we do the training next month, to take a look at what those thresholds are so that you know ahead of time and can close out your year without a ton of journal entries. But you have to meet the right level of effort. That's what these things are. Now, failures for IDEA, special education maintenance of effort, the SEA is liable for a recovery action, which means I have to collect state money from you and send it back to the feds if you fail. Otherwise, you can't take new IDEA money at all. So no news is good news. I usually only have 1 or 2 a year because you guys are on it. Now, there's also federal programs maintenance of effort, right? This is under the ESEA and the ESEA programs. They also have one. We have a link here to this document, and thank you, Kathy, for the page numbers because these suckers are long, but it talks about how you also have to meet this level of effort. If you think about it, you guys, most of the spending you have is out of your state and local dollars. The federal funds, again, are not that much. So it's not difficult for the most part for you guys to meet these level of effort. Now, the piece that's important to take away from this is that subpart 2 tells you guys that for ESEA and ESEA, for your guys' maintenance of effort, you only have to meet 90%. And you can do it either on the combined aggregate expenditures or you can do that per student, the per capita. And so that's super exciting that you don't have to meet the 100% threshold. Kathy, I think you're still on. Did you want to talk about this at all?
I am still on. Just took me a minute to click on those little buttons. And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking that you get a pass per se the first year if you don't pass it, but if you do not pass it 2 years in a row, then it's a problem. Seeing a yes, thumbs up from Josh.
Yep. And again, not more than 1 or 2 districts a year are notified. And a lot of the times when I notify any people is, a lot of times it's because, there was something that's hidden somewhere else. And if you guys can prove it out to us, then it just goes away because you've proved it out to us. So no news is good news. Again, here's where it talks about the difference on you guys, though. If you did have that second year and you failed, they would reduce your actual allocations. I can't do that on IDEA. I have to have you pay me state money and I have to send it to the feds. So there are some little nuanced differences. You might just get less money on the federal program sides, like with those title dollars, if you didn't meet this level of effort. So we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty because there are entire hour sessions on these things. But just to keep it on your radar, yep, we know we're spending that. We have most of our funds are state and local dollars to run your guys' programs there at the schools. Now, how about some federal funding allocations updates? Sadly, I don't have very many for you. So we do expect to get these. We have, I think, one of the smaller grants that came through, and we'll be starting those allocations as soon as possible. But why are they delayed? Remember how there was like 4 or 5 continuing resolutions and Congress would not pass the budget from last October. So that delayed all of the different grant programs from having their numbers. And it's kind of a convoluted process there where they look at the total poverty levels or low income ratios, those types of things for an entire state population that feeds a lot of those data calculations for how much each state will get for certain funding sources. So we have to wait for all that stuff to play out. Then they put out the tables, is what I call them, for the different funding streams. And they'll say, Idaho, you get this for special education and this much for Title I and this much for Title II. And Kathy did put in here, we do have some preliminary allocations. They're starting to come in. However, we just got the low income data from those submissions you did at the end of March to child nutrition. So we're starting to put the pieces together. We will have more updates to send out. We can always do this on our recap if we have more intel on that. But as soon as possible, we are trying. We are going to be jamming through as soon as possible. So what I'm telling you here, based on what we've been told and what we saw in those the budgets that came through that were approved from Congress, was that some of the bigger programs like Title I and Special Ed got a tiny bit more money overall for the full all states total allocation. So we're just telling you guys that go ahead and just budget flat. Consider that it's going to be similar. Now, unless you have one of these situations. So think about what's going on in my district. We've seen some school districts closing some schools, right? Because they've got a drop in enrollment. Some of it's because of just the difference in population moving into our state, or it could be a whole number of things. But if you have a substantial drop in your enrollment, or a huge increase because some of you guys, the charters, you added a whole grade or whatever that is, then that might help you know that you have some possible changes one way or the other to consider. Most of you guys aren't, going to know if you had a significant change to your low income rates, unless you were the person that turned that information into child nutrition. You could compare that. But just remember, again, you're going to be following all those grant timelines for the non-renewing funding sources, farewell to ESSER and all those other tidings waivers that are all going to go away at the same time. So when I say budget flat, don't budget those if they're gone. So please, please, please make sure you distinguish that. You got to tell a story. That one's gone. We spent it by June. We're not even going to have that fund anymore. Take it out. It's not in the budget. Make sure all those things are in place. But yeah, I would say safe to budget pretty flat for the main funds that you guys have. Now, how about some more updates? This one we actually have a real update. Uniform grant guidance. The White House and Office of Management and Budget, OMB, you'll hear them called. They made some huge changes to the uniform grant guidance, which is what we teach to you guys all the time to help you guys manage your programs and not ever have to send back money for something that wasn't allowable. But the director, Jason Miller, talked about how really, this is the plumbing of the federal systems, the way that this uniform grant guidance is set up. And so I think of it as going from like plastic pipes to these nice copper pipes, right? They're really trying to change this framework. They're really trying to make it easier on us and make meaningful, impactful changes so that they don't have to do it every couple of years, hopefully. We have a nice White House blog if you want to read it, but it talks really about how the federal government provides like 1.2 trillion in funding annually for thousands of programs from grants and other forms of this financial assistance that you guys may see. And so the biggest takeaway that they've been talking to us about is how they're simplifying the language and the requirements. They're expanding some thresholds on certain things like from purchasing and from the single audit and some other things that you'll be seeing some details come through on. But the goal is to make it easier, which I think we are all super happy about. Now, let's cut the red tape. That's really the whole goal here, right? There's a link to the actual memorandum. And thanks again, Maddie, for putting these in the chat. But it really, again, it talks about we're trying to cut the red tape. We're trying to make this more manageable because we know there's a lot of rural and other places where it's hard to hire people. It's hard to get those people that know, that come in with background. We need to make this readable for people to be able to access and know what they're doing. So this is a huge lift. It is taking a ton of people, a ton of time to make good, meaningful changes. So the goal again, the biggest goal, overarching goal is to improve performance, these program performance, because you'll know what you're doing. And it's going to reduce that administrative burden. And help you guys to mitigate the risk of an inappropriate use. So again, you guys don't know what you don't know. So we try to help train you here. We talk about all of these different uses of funding and the supplement, not supplant. We talk about all these things on this forum, on this group, in a safe community where you guys can ask questions. We never, ever want to have to come to you and say, well, that wasn't allowed. Send me a check back for $100,000. Because nobody wants to have to go do the walk of shame to the superintendent and business manager and say, I hope you have $100,000 because we did something wrong. So again, super helpful. I think some of the changes that we have seen. Now, if you can't wait until trainings that will be coming, we have a link to this super exciting publication. It's only 648 pages. Now, if you really want to read it, we are sending you the link. Thank you, Maddie. It is exhilarating reading. Not. So if you are not that kind of person that wants to sit and read this just to find out what's happening, because remember, it's happening October 1st, never fear. You can drink your cup of coffee because we are going to train you. That is our job. So we will be providing resources and recorded content for you guys to refer to. Implementation is effective October 1st, which is the actual federal start date. We usually pre-fund you that first quarter because we're allowed to, but gotta be, you guys got to start adhering to it by October 1st. So sometime soon, we will be putting together some trainings and there'll be targeted trainings just on the things that apply to specifically to you, to education related, to help you guys just break down those little nuggets at a time. One of the more, I would say, annoying things is that some of the code numbers have changed slightly. Just enough to where what you guys have already adopted as uniform grant guidance is not going to be adequate anymore. So every single district will, or charter will have to re-adopt the new uniform grant guidance. So we will help you with that. We will provide resources with that. And really, hopefully, take consideration from you guys into how that might affect you or when the best time would be for you guys to adopt those things. Because we realize a lot of you guys adopted ISBA policies, others were using our grant manual, so we will try and make sure that we tell you where the changes are, if you have your own manuals, those types of things. So just be excited that you don't have to read the 648 pages, right? Yay! All right. Now, I want to remind folks, and I'm hoping that we can open this up for some discussion. We had developed this grant checklist, and Maddie just put that one in the chat as well, a while back. And it was kind of a starting point, we hoped, for districts that, hey, we're getting close to year end. We want to make sure that we have this checklist, and maybe you have like specifics for each program. Hey, we want to make sure that we talk to the Migrant Ed program because we know they have this spring forum, or this, the last parent engagement night is this, and we want to make sure that we close this out, and or we have our own P card program with a strategy there. And so we know that there's these 2 people doing late travel, and every year they have to go to this one conference. So I'm not sure if anyone already has one, but I'm hoping folks will come off mute and feel brave enough to say, yeah, we have a checklist, because I'm looking for additional procedures or checklists and strategies that you guys have to maybe be a presenter next month. But before we do next month, does anybody out there in the land of this webinar today have a checklist? Even just say in the chat, yeah, we've got one, and we live and die and breathe by it. Is this something that you guys do? Do you just put it all on the business office and hope they get it done? What's your strategy? If you're a program, folks, do you get like a communication email that says, make sure that you close out your POs by this dates and drain it down so we know you're not going to need to spend? Anybody have anything like that? If not, next month is going to be great for you. Not seeing a whole lot yet. Well, I would just encourage you to take this link and start it, and just look at your thought process, even that, yep, annually we look at this. We do an inventory check here. If you're not doing inventory, I'm going to tell you that's one of our top findings. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't have any inventory. Well, you still actually have to show that you took an inventory, that you asked and made sure that you checked the purchasing thresholds and you didn't have anything that would have needed to be on an inventory list, and that so-and-so signed off on it. It's a dumb finding to have. It's so frustrating. So make sure you have that system in place. If you guys still use purchase orders for certain larger purchasing, do you have a cutoff date? I think I gave this example at the very, very beginning. We have a couple folks that forget to turn their mileage in from their last month, and their contract date ended in May, and they're off for the summer, and they come back in August, and you get a whole bunch more mileage from May. So do you have something? Do you know who your culprits are? Do you try and now have that be a checklist before people go off contract, that they've turned this in, they've turned that in? We've communicated on the Medicaid that was the very, very last claim that's coming in. Austin told us last month about the claim of shame, or I think he called it. It was like, oh no. Well, I mean, it's fantastic that you have revenue coming in, but if it was not what you planned for and you've already closed out, that can be a little rough. So all these little things in the checklist. So if you haven't used it, please do. Anyway, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time back. Go back up here. We are just about done for today. Do we have any other questions? Any other training wish lists items you want to throw in the chat? Hey, please say this by the end of the year. If you want to put that in the chat, great. Or send me an email. Or send any of these folks an email if it's someone that you know that you have a good relationship with. Maybe you know Josh from way back in the day, or maybe you have a really positive experience with Stacy when she was there doing monitoring, or something like that. So reach out to who you know and say, hey, I learned a lot from this process. Anyway, we just want to thank everybody for your time. I'll give you back about 10 minutes today unless anybody else has anything to share. And again, if we get allocations in earlier, we will send a communication out. But in the meantime, thank you guys all for coming today, and we'll see you next month on the Communities of Practice.